A narcissist is incapable of demonstrating empathy. And that's why, as a parent, it is so scary.
Welcome to Lucid Living with Bree, the podcast helping women to heal from the mindfuck of confusing relationships and break out of those frustrating cycles so that you can step into your best self and attract and hold healthy love. I am your host, Bree Wolta, relationship clarity coach and EFT certified practitioner. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome to this episode. On the show today, I am talking with Margot Rowanay about how to co-parent with a narcissistic person. And in general, just what narcissism is, what it looks like. Co-parenting itself can have so many challenges, and to throw into the dynamics somebody with narcissistic tendencies is a lot. And as the person who is trying to manage the kids and this narcissistic co-parent, it can be very overwhelming. So it was important to me to have this conversation with Margot because she's a licensed professional counselor and she works with a lot of people who are in this situation. So in this episode, you are going to learn the 4 core red flags to look for in narcissistic people, how to identify if somebody has narcissistic tendencies or traits, the behaviors in your children that point to having a narcissistic parent, and how you can help your child understand and integrate and be with those emotions and that experience. And then what to do if you're experiencing post-separation abuse so that you don't lose your goddamn mind. Because the narcissistic abuse, the post-separation abuse is terrible. It is so overwhelming and challenging for you to hold that space while also holding space for your children. So giving you some tools on how you can tend to yourself so that you can best support your family. And be sure to stick around to the end of the episode where we will pull an oracle card with a specific message you can use this week to stay more conscious in your healing. Margot, it's so good to see you again.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be back and on such a hot topic. It's going to be fun.
Oh my gosh, I know. I want to start by what we just said before we started recording, which always happens. I'm like, all the good stuff is right before. In how hot of a topic narcissism is right now and how the term is being used in ways that are not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you think about just what's happening in culture right now.
Right. So with social media, they target us. And so I've always gotten a lot of mental health information fodder in my social media. However, what I'm seeing is there's this huge trend that a lot of my clients are starting to see it. So I've had multiple clients reach out to me in the last couple of weeks and be like, am I a narcissist? And sometimes I have to stop and laugh after I calm them down. And I'm like, the fact that you're asking me that, I already know the answer.
Yeah.
You're not, because you're worried about it and you're able to have that self-awareness and identify. And it's so important that we know that personality is a spectrum, right? So we're all at some level going to have and identify characteristics of different personality disorders. The part that's important is to make sure that we know it's disordered, right? And so with disordered means there's something that's not going well in their life. It's impairing their functioning in certain levels. And we can get more into that later. But yes, people are using it as a buzzword and they're using it in a way that it's like, I think people are using it as a synonym for vanity. And I'm like, that's not actually what narcissism or a narcissist is. It's not just someone with a very high sense of self. There's all these other things as well that go into.
Yeah. I think that's the overgeneralized understanding of someone who's really full of themselves or the self-absorbed person.
Yeah.
And there's so much more in that. But
Right.
I also have that experience with clients where they're like, I'm the toxic one. I'm the toxic one. And I'm like, okay, well, there may be things that you're bringing to the relationship that aren't as functional as you want them to be. And let's try to stay away from the categories of toxic and not toxic.
Right.
But to your point, the very fact that you're asking and are concerned about being the narcissist means you're not the narcissist.
Right. And can you accept responsibility?
Yeah.
You can accept responsibility. We're already leaps and bounds away from that mental health diagnosis. And then you add you want to correct it or fix it or change it. Wow. Like, okay, we're not even talking about narcissism anymore.
Yeah, we all have places where when we start to do that self-exploration and introspection, we're like, "Oh, I could change that," or "I've been showing up really unavailable or really sort of emotionally immature in that place." But narcissism, let's talk about what narcissism is and what NPD is.
Yeah. So I am very careful to diagnose someone with narcissistic personality disorder. As a master's level clinician with my training, I would not want to give someone that diagnosis. I would want to send them for more formal diagnostic testing that I am not credentialed to do. So, in order for can I have a clinical impression of someone and pretty much tell? Yeah, I have that gut feeling and I know because I've been around it so many times. But then I would send someone for a formal diagnosis. And so the testing to be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder requires quite a lot. And people are often underdiagnosed because the people that are truly narcissistic are not seeking out any type of mental health treatment. Furthermore, once they have that diagnosis, very rarely do they want to fix it.
Yeah.
Right. And so people that are narcissistic personality disorders are really the lowest population we see in treatment. And if we do see them in mental health treatment, often for other things, right? If we do see it and someone with narcissistic personality disorder in treatment, it's usually to work on co-parenting or betrayal of someone else. It's everyone else's issues, not
Yeah.
really own. And you're not doing much. They're looking for a lot of sympathy and empathy from the
Yeah.
therapist or the clinician and not really looking at how do I change my schema that I use to interpret life so that I'm no longer a victim.
Yes. Yeah, I would imagine, like, couples therapy is kind of a good catch for seeing the narcissistic partner because in some way the other partner has, like, gotten them into couples therapy because they've done something that there needs to be a professional to help them with.
Right. And often there's not a lot of reconciliation that's happening in those situations.
Yeah. Yeah. So NPD is like when we talk about the scale, right? It's like the far left or the far right. It's the most extreme version of narcissism. And
Mhm.
then we have the narcissistic tendencies.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about how do you identify a narcissist? What are some of the key components, not diagnosing, but just like being
Yeah.
able to identify like this is narcissistic behavior.
Right. So I think it's also important to state that a lot of personalities come from early childhood trauma or their parent had that personality structure or disorder. And so the child often mirrors or learns to mirror that same behavior, which we see a little bit less, but that does happen as well. And so I just right off the bat want to understand like, why does this happen? It's an adaptation of personality that's created for the child to cope, for the individual to cope with their life circumstances. And so narcissistic personality disorder, often I say that their core fear is of insignificance.
Mm.
Right, and so if you can conceptualize it, if that's their core number one fear, someone might tell me I'm insignificant or I worry that I'm insignificant, then everything they do is going to be to combat that or actively challenge that. And anytime their significance is threatened by anyone, right? It not just parent, but by peer, by their own child, it threatens the false reality that they've made up in their minds and they have to reassert dominance and show that they, in fact, are significant. And that's where we see all of the unhealthy or toxic behaviors come up. It's when their version of reality has been threatened because they are not living in reality. They're living in their version that they've concocted where they are important and significant. But at a deep level, they struggle with that.
Yeah. Which is why the self-reflection is not something that can happen because it threatens their very sense of self. It threatens the image that they're portraying or that they're living in.
Correct. And one other quantifier I like to put on things is there's different clusters of personality. And so we talk a lot. Another big trigger word is narcissistic abuse, right? That is a legitimate thing. However, I like to quantify on it there's different types of abuse, right? We know that there is physical, which we often think of first, and then we think of emotional, mental, financial, spiritual. There's lots of different types. Typically, someone that is a physically abusive partner, they're also picking up on other personality disorders. That's not a necessary characteristic or diagnostic criteria for narcissism. So I like to put that on there. Oftentimes, the narcissist, the true narcissist, NPD, is going to do a lot of mental and emotional abuse, much, much more than we would see someone that's financially abusive. So I like to kind of give that to help someone understand as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So for people listening, if they've been in contact or had experience with people who have this inability to self-reflect or take accountability, like those are two red flags, let's call them, of things to look for. What else are some of those signs that people can be aware of with people who are narcissistic?
Another big trait is empathy. There's an inability to demonstrate empathy. Empathy is something that we get in the prefrontal cortex, right? And empathy and sympathy are different. Sympathy is I can understand that you would have those emotions
Mhm.
and I can be somewhat compassionate towards you, right? That's sympathy. Empathy is I can sit in that emotion with you and I can feel it myself. A narcissist is incapable of demonstrating empathy. And that's why, as a parent, it is so scary, right? Because if you can't feel what your child's feeling, you can only sit in your own experience. That's a very one sided relationship. And you're not able to then parent that way. And so you're only having your own experience. It's one sided. And dangerous because kids don't have the vocabulary or the mental capacity to say, "Hey, you're not actually noticing that I'm really hurt right now." Or like, "That experience was incredibly challenging for," and also how you responded was not appropriate emotionally.
Yeah.
So at their core, they cannot experience empathy. They might be adept at acting it.
Yeah.
You
I'm glad you brought
feel that there's a depth, right? I said, like, it's like that, like, they're trying to demonstrate it to you because they know, like, socially, right, really skilled narcissists, they're looking at everyone else to see how are they responding, like, what should I be doing in this moment? And they can act it, but they don't feel it. They only feel for themselves, and so when they really cry, crying for themselves, not for other people.
Yeah. I'm so happy you brought that up, the acting piece, because specifically when you find narcissists who are therapists or who are in the mental health field or who are just people who have like studied the terminology, right? They know the terms to say, they know the things to say to the partner of like, about boundaries or self-awareness or I'm so woke because of these things or whatever they're sharing. And it's like you said, it's learned, it's mirrored, and it's not sustainable. So oftentimes they'll be that way in the beginning, or they'll be that way when it's pleasing to them or at some advantage for them. And then as soon as it's no longer those things, that all goes out the window.
Right, right.
Yeah. So that deep, true empathy is something that we have no with everybody, right? We have when you have empathy, you show that connective experience with people pretty consistently in your life.
Mhm. Yeah. And so that makes it challenging because they might appear to
Mhm.
have the full range of emotions
Yeah.
and be able to express those to someone else, and really they don't. And so what you get in relationships is like this deep confusion of like, why, how are you not getting this? Right. And then they're like, well, how are you getting it? Right. That's where the gaslighting comes in. Or like,
Yeah.
the only reason I feel this way is because you did X, Y, and Z. And it's always shifting, shifting, shifting,
Yes.
shifting blames. It's just everything is on the other person.
Yes. Yes. The confusion piece to me is like the ultimate red flag. It's like if in your relationship you're feeling more often confused and anxious and like something's not making sense or you're walking on eggshells around this person because they're like you don't know how they're going to react to you.
Right.
That to me is a better sign than like, oh, they never apologize. Because sometimes they'll say the word but they don't mean it. It's just to get you to stop complaining about it or stop doing something, right? It's like it's all manipulative in the way that that benefits them.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And the walking on eggshells part, I think, is another indicator that someone has some type of personality, is got something disordered with their personality. Is that when a partner or a child feels like I don't want to upset them,
Mhm.
right? Like that's not typically how we feel with someone that's stable and regulated.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of people bending and shifting to accommodate the narcissist
Yeah.
or someone with narcissistic tendencies. Also, another thing that you see a lot of the time is there's an instability of either interpersonal relationships,
Mhm.
so that would be like social relationships. There might be occupational instability at some points or another. There might be relational, like as a romantic partner, there's typically difficulties there. So you start to see these different levels where you're like, like their functioning is impaired on some level. And there's this consistent theme where they can't get along with people or people are doing them dirty or out to get them, right? Everyone turns on them. No one can be trusted or no one sees how great they are. And you start to like it builds
Mhm.
because when we look at the best determination of future behavior is past behavior. And so often people that are in a relationship with a narcissist, they say that they feel like they're collecting red flags because it's not just one thing,
Yeah.
right? It's lots of little things, but then when you put them all together, it's like you have this huge flag, right? It's like
Yes.
it's just the one. It's not that you can't say you're sorry, like you said. It's like literally all these other things, and they're like on this wild goose chase, and then they put all the pieces together, and that's typically the breaking point when they're like, "Can't look past this anymore."
Yeah. And part of the confusion comes in too as the partner starts to bring the red flag to the person's attention of like, hey, this is a little strange or this is not working well for me. The narcissistic person is really skilled again at keeping that image and for their survival has to maintain that sense of self. So that's where the gaslighting comes in, that's where manipulation comes in. And then the other partner starts to discount their own knowing or discount the own feelings in their body of like, this doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
So, for those of you listening, if you've been in that experience where you're like, I've tried to bring the red flag and then he tells me it's not a red flag and then I start to believe it's not a red flag. Like that's also part of this process and there's nothing wrong with you in
Mhm.
that experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
Y-
Yeah.
Yeah. You had mentioned about the one-sided relationship parenting.
Yeah.
And what I thought of when you said that was not only one-sided, but the child is this tool almost, is responsible for the parent, for maintaining the parent's sense of self.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The child often gets used, or children get used as pawns, and we know that attachment is designed for children to attach to both of their parents,
Mhm.
and to attach to the primary caregiver, and that's for survival. And so kids are designed to attach to mom and mom and dad and dad, whoever, right? Mom and grandma, whoever they are, whoever the caregivers are, kids are designed to attach, and that's necessary for survival.
Yeah.
And the child becomes responsible for maintaining that bond, which is a ton of pressure on a kid, right? And they, from a very young age, start to caretake the narcissist emotions, behaviors, right? They learn what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, what to say, what to not say, right? What to tell, what to not tell. And it's very unhealthy for children. And it's really hard when you're trying to co parent with someone because unless you're a mental health professional on paper, some of these things are really hard to say, like why it's so unhealthy for a child. So often they get custody and equal custody or some significant amount. And until children are at a certain age where they realize, like, hey, my parent makes me feel really bad about myself, or I feel like I'm second to them, and they're always asking me to do favors for them or make it easier on them, or say, like, if I really loved them, I wouldn't hang out with my friends. I would go have dinner with them because they're my parent. And like
Yeah.
starting to make them feel guilty for having outside relationships or having a life outside of the parent. Or, oh, yeah, my parent is so upset they broke up with their partner, they want me to text their partner and say, like, what a good person they are, what a good dad they are. And like, that is typical behavior
Yeah.
of a narcissistic parent.
Yeah. Yeah. With children that you see, because you work specifically with the adolescents of people who have,
I do have some. Yeah. I do
yeah,
have a handful. Yeah. And
yeah,
it happens every once in a while. And whether their parent has been clinically diagnosed or not, I have enough information from both parties and from my client to typically know, like, okay. And sometimes I get young adults that are out of their parents' homes and they're just like, hey, I've been doing a lot of research and I've been wondering, like, what's going on with me? Why do I have these caretaking tendencies or codependent tendencies? And I'm realizing, like, my parent was a narcissist. Like, I would like to work on. So I do work with those kids. Yeah.
yeah. What would be some of the, if someone's listening and they're like, I'm starting to recognize behaviors in my child that maybe point to this, right? What are some of the, you said caretaking and
Mhm.
that over responsibility. Are there other things that can show up behaviorally for adolescents that can kind of point to this over responsibility for a parent?
Oftentimes it's a lot of turmoil for a child because they have the attachment to their parent and they want to have the bond, and that could be healthy in a lot of circumstances. So I'm not saying, like, cut that parent off, but it's learning what boundaries are appropriate because a teenage daughter and her dad are going to have a very different relationship based on if that dad is mentally and emotionally healthy or and stable or and what he expects of his daughter. And looking at how do we start to set those boundaries that you can have a relationship with your parent, but they can only penetrate so far into your self-esteem or your image or your other relationships, right?
Yeah.
And that's difficult. Boundaries for adults are difficult. So with teenagers, like, it's really hard. And when you're still reliant on that parent and have to go over to their house or be part of their life, it's really confusing. So I see a lot of inner turmoil and conflict with that child. And typically, there's a lot of resentment towards the parent that is a narcissist, regardless of how much love there is. And so it's also working through that to say, okay, what is a healthy relationship like with this parent? It's going to be different depending on how significant that parent's NPD diagnosis really is or what those behaviors look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's often the other parent will know, right? The primary caregiver typically knows that the other parent that they're co-parenting with or not or had some relationship was a narcissist. That's probably why it didn't work out. They probably know it's not going to change. The narcissist will most likely have a high likelihood of getting into another relationship pretty early on,
Hmm. Hmm.
and the child is a pawn, right? And the child is there for the parents, again, sense of significance.
Yes. In my experience with an ex who I believe was narcissistic, like I can't imagine having to have maintained contact and like
It's terrible for a lot of people.
yeah, yeah, and the clients that I work with who do have they share a child or are trying to even exit the relationship in the first place, it's so tumultuous in that experience. And in a lot of ways this post-separation abuse happens with the parent.
Mhm.
And what are some ways that you help the parent in the co-parenting experience of like when you have to keep communicating? You can't just like take the kid away
So what
and
I
navigate the courts and like that whole
it is
shebang.
it is so terrible. I will tell you right now, it's terrible to witness. It is, like, terrible for the person inside of it. It's hard for the therapist because I can feel that in the session, the tension and the weight of it as well. And so I know it's extremely difficult. Um, One of the best things they can do is have their own support, have a place where you can talk freely about it because the time and space to do is not in front of your ex-partner. It's not in front of your kids. It's, like, in your own time and space, and that's usually therapy or life coaching or a close, small group of support. So always find your own support. And then when we can manage our expectations appropriately, that's the best thing we can do. And so I often start to joke with my clients is like, when they go off, I'm like, well, what would you expect though?
Mhm.
When we know someone's a narcissist, we start to expect them to behave like one.
Yeah,
And most of the people are pretty textbook,
yeah,
right? And so, um, when you expect that a narcissist would behave like a normal person, that's when you set yourself up for disappointment and failure,
Yeah.
right? But when you expect that they act as if they are constantly scared that they're insignificant, that that they are the one that's right, that they're going to go to the end of the earth to show you that they're right, like, then we almost can predict what they're going to do. Most narcissists are pretty textbook, like I said.
Yeah. It's wild to me. I'm like, when did they get when did they get the textbook? When did these people learn these things? Like, because it is so textbook.
Hmm.
And to your point about the expectations, especially with the child of the person, like helping them come to this understanding of and grieving around the parent's inability to be the mother or father that they ever or that they want,
Hmm.
right? It's like if you keep showing up to that relationship with your mom or dad and they keep showing you who they really are, it's like my therapist like use this in a different way, but she's like, it's going to the dry well for water,
Right.
right? And you keep going with all this hope that you're gonna have your thirst quenched, and there is always no water in the well.
Hmm. And
So
I tell my the kids or the teens or the young adults that I work with is like, I really just start to build an awareness of behaviors and patterns. And we don't need a formal diagnosis to tell us that something is hurting us.
yeah.
We don't. And whether your parent, mom, or dad, because women can be narcissists as well,
Mhm.
whoever fits, if they fit into some of those categories and patterns, okay, well, let's just start to take inventory of that and see like, what do we need to do so that doesn't hurt you again? And it doesn't necessarily mean cutting them out of their lives. A lot of indicators that someone has in narcissistic parents is like they've tried to do no contact it multiple times in their life.
Mhm.
And it will be unsuccessful times. Because again, that bond and attachment doesn't just go away because the parent's unhealthy
Yeah.
or sick. Right. I often say, like, in order for a narcissist to change, they have to change every single belief system that they have about themselves and about the world. That's not just like one thing. That's not just like changing action. It's every single belief. And every thought we have filters through our belief system.
Yeah.
So they're
And
gonna change.
oh my god, and that takes so much, um, like, determination to do that work because that's painful work. So, the chances of a narcissist doing that are slim, and it probably has happened, but, like, it's overcoming mountains and mountains of pain. I don't know. It's like it will be a heavy lift for them.
Right. Right. So the best we can expect oftentimes is to accept responsibility, honesty, and a little bit more accountability within themselves. Like
Mhm.
that is really the best. And then behavior modification.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At least if you feel that way, if you want it, if you have that inclination to just have the impulse control to withhold, to not say do the thing that you want to do and then deal with it later. That's
Yeah.
usually the best bet. But again, that takes self-awareness and that takes a willingness to
Yeah.
want to change and an acceptance that there's something to change. Most people that are truly narcissistic are going to fight the diagnosis to the nail. They think they're great. They
Yeah.
think life is rocking for them,
Yeah.
right?
Everything is everyone else's problem.
Correct. So that's why you're stonewalled,
Mhm.
really. And that's what makes the relationship on any level so difficult. Because you have one party that's super invested and willing to change and wants to grow and improve, and another party that is just in a stage of denial.
Mhm. Yeah. So for the partner of the narcissist or narcissistic person, helping them manage their expectations, helping them be able to show up and from a place of like we're expecting them to act like a narcissist and not going to be surprised when they send that really mean text or when the child comes home confused about whatever. What else do you help coach parents on in that dynamic of like maintaining contact and
I also remind them, like, do you trust that you are parenting and raising an an individual that's going to be able to critically think and assess situations. And if you trust you're doing that, and are you modeling healthy behavior, healthy emotional regulation, talking about healthy relationships, appropriate boundaries, like, are you doing all that? Because if you're the primary parent and you're doing all that, chances are your kid is gonna learn sooner or later and recognize that behavior. And you don't have to tell them that. They're gonna recognize it on their own. They're gonna learn on their own. And then they can come to you and be like, okay, now what? Right? Like, we don't need to warn our kids about it. Like, as long as it's, relatively safe, your kids know. Kids are designed for survival.
Yeah.
That's why they're on edge. They're doing what they have to do to survive the situation if they have to continue to be in it. Not that I'm condoning or encouraging that, but
Yeah.
they're doing what they have to do to get through. And they have another parent that loves them and is willing to probably go to the ends of the earth for them. Right?
Yeah. I'd imagine you as the healthier parent, like, as long as you're providing the space for the child to come and talk about what they're experiencing and help them, like, bounce this critical thinking off, depending on what age they're at, right? On their capacity to do that. But if you're the safe place that can come and, like, sort of debrief what happened and help them move through the emotion or release it, like, that is the skill. That is the love and the care that they need to be a resilient person.
Right. And helping them understand that they are not responsible for the other parent's emotions, just as they are not responsible for your emotions. Right. And that can be like, wow, I'm really sorry that, daddy cried when you left and that he said you don't love him. I know that you do. You
Yeah.
know, that is not your fault. Right.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
know that you do. And you know what? When people are sad, they cry. Right? They will learn, right? And however is age appropriate. And then also when you have teenagers, be like, well, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, do you feel like you don't love your dad? And they're like, of course I love him, but I just was ready to go. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what do you still feel there? Well, I'm really sad that I disappointed him and I feel responsible for him. Okay. Well, do you feel responsible for me and my feelings? No. Okay, well, what's the difference there, right? Just kinda
Yeah.
walking them through that and
Yeah.
helping like, you're not blaming or you don't have to say anything about narcissism, right? You're
Yeah.
just talking about being emotionally mature at that point,
Yeah.
'cause a
Yeah.
narcissist isn't.
Right. Right. And in that situation, to not respond with, like, "Oh my god, I can't believe your father is doing this again to you, and he is such a narcissist," and, not responding that way and saving your anger for your therapy or your safe friends that you can process with, because that then puts the child in the middle.
Right, and, like, we don't need to talk about mental health diagnosis with kids, right? It doesn't matter.
No.
That doesn't matter because the whatever he has is irrelevant. The behavior is still there. We wanna address behavior.
Yeah.
And like learn what that means. And also, what you're doing is parents set the foundation for other relationships later in life. So, you want to teach your kids what is healthy emotional space and distance, what is healthy boundaries, what they're responsible for, what they're not. Because if you allow a child to feel that over and over, who are they going to pick as their spouse, as their partner, as their best friend? Probably someone that reminds them of the narcissistic parent, right? Because that's what feels comfortable and familiar to them. So, what
Yes.
we really want to do is unlearn all of that familiarity and
Yeah.
say, hey, that actually doesn't feel good. I don't want to repeat that. What I actually want to repeat is this.
Yeah. Yes, which is why people listening to this podcast, the people who are in therapy, are in coaching, are doing the work, like, thank you. Thank you for doing this work for you, because you are helping yourself unlearn, which means you can therefore teach something new to your kids or teach
Right.
something new to the people that you interact with. We show up by doing, and you being that example, like, kids are so observant and they're such sponges for things that, your body language, your tone, your reaction, like, it's not necessarily just the words coming out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so admirable for people who are
Right.
deconstructing maybe what they grew up with, so that they're not then passing it down to the next generation.
Right. And recognizing that as the former partner of the narcissist, anything your kid tells you about them is probably going to be a trigger for PTSD. So
Mm.
in that moment, setting aside, I know it is hard and it is a huge ask.
Yeah.
Set aside your traumatic response to what's happening,
Mhm.
take some deep breaths or do some tapping, and then have an emotionally regulated conversation about the unwanted behaviors, right? And how we deal with them in a very broad context,
Mhm.
not blaming, because then you get on their level.
Yeah.
And also another thing I like to do is our brains work best when we have a template for the next time. So maybe setting your kids up for like, okay, so then you have the conversation. So like, if that happens again next time, what would be helpful for you to know or to do, or what can we work on so that's easier for you next time if it
Yeah.
happens again, right? Because we know it's going to happen again. Yes,
Yeah.
you don't have to tell them that, but just
Yeah.
setting them up so that the kid feels a little bit more confident and comfortable next time to respond in a way that they have some control over.
Yeah. Yeah. And these skills are, whether you have a narcissistic parent or not, they're so important to teach your child, like, what is your responsibility? How do
Mm,
kids learn if the other person's feelings are theirs or not, right? It's from being taught. So even if they have a bully on the playground or they have a narcissistic teacher or, it doesn't have to necessarily be the parent,
right.
but just teaching your kids to, again, be that critically thinking and how do you feel about this and what are your boundaries
Mhm.
is so, I believe, should be taught in schools. Like these skills are so important around boundaries and communication. Like, why are we not teaching this stuff?
Yeah, and I think they are starting to teach communication on a base level, and we do try to work that out. However, it doesn't really go further unless you're going into specific skilled group.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think that there's a lot more that we can do. And like really, the base for communication is set at home, not at school. So everyone has a lot of power and autonomy over how skilled their kids are with communication. And it starts with us. Like it trickles down, right?
Yeah. I hope this episode gives people some sense of hope of, like, even though you can't control the narcissistic partner and their behavior and the way that they are psychologically abusing potentially or emotionally abusing the child, you can that child is not doomed. You
Right.
you have so much control on your side to help them manage that, process that, understand that, and to not give up hope in that experience, even though it's hard as hell, I'm sure of it.
Right, right, and if you know that and you're pretty confident that your partner was a narcissist and that's partially the reason that the relationship ended, find your kids a therapist that understands that and is adept at dealing with that because that will be your kid's lifeline when the home is chaos. And also a therapist that knows about it and is got some understanding of how boundaries work is going to be able to help parcel through with your child like what is really healthy for them on ultimately. And I would never tell a kid to cut off a parent if there's not a legitimate reason,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah,
what I will say is, hey, like your parent can't talk to you that way. So what do we need to do? Right. Also, go get your other parent so we can talk to them about it right now. Right. Like have
yeah,
some disclosure and then set up a plan for next time so you feel comfortable in the situation and can protect yourself. Right. And so there's lots of ways. Like I think finding a therapist that really knows and is skilled and also going to align with the child
mhm,
because at the end of the day, I'm sure they're gonna go to family therapy or whatever kind of therapy down the line, but if your kid has their own therapist, they always have that landing spot to come back to and be like, "Help me make sense of this. Like, why did that just happen?" Like, or "I just feel so confused," right? So having their own person, their own space, like, that's the best thing you can do for your kid as well.
yeah, and that gives them another connected experience, right?
And
Another relational experience with a healthy person. Yeah,
it removes you from triage,
yeah,
which is ultimately for your own.
yeah, yeah. One thing I wanna circle back on is, so this understanding of a narcissist as a wounded person, right? They're acting from this place of wounding. What I hear from clients sometimes is this over compassion. Like, he is just wounded. He's trying his best. He's wounded. He's wounded. And I hear that over and over and over again. What is your what's your advice for people on how to hold both the understanding that this person is hurting and not allow their hurtful behavior to continue?
Yeah. Well, I think that that comes down to recognizing that I can be extremely empathetic for someone's story and also recognize that their actions, like that might be their very best, and that's still not acceptable. Right. And if they're hurting someone else, that's not acceptable. And we can have compassion and set boundaries. That's actually how we have boundaries.
Yeah.
If you have compassion and you don't set boundaries, that's called enabling. So you're actually enabling the narcissist to stay sick. Um, and so I think, yeah, understanding a lot of stuff went down in their childhood to become the way they are. And they have the other misconception is that narcissists have such a high opinion of themselves, right? Because that's what they project to the world, because that's what they want to feel. They actually have an extremely weak ego
Yeah.
that is very sensitive and sways. The pendulum swings constantly. So minding yourself, like they project an inflated sense of self when really inside, I like say they're like Mr. Peanut, like they're
Yeah.
really, really small.
Yeah.
Uh, and so setting the boundaries, because that's for you. And at the end of the day, we are not responsible for what happened to us, and we are responsible to solve our problems.
Yeah.
And if they're unwilling to get help, that's on them at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And that work, right? Of first identifying that you are worth protecting is
Mhm.
often a challenge for women. So, like, just starting to plant the seed, if those listening aren't quite in that place, they're still very much in the his pain is my pain, and whatever he gives me is good enough. Until you start to really identify your own sense of self and your own needs and your own, like, what is acceptable to you, not to other people that you've been around. Like, that unenmeshment is a necessary part to then begin to set the boundaries around, like, that might be your best, but that's not good enough for me, or that's not appropriate.
Right. And my one of my favorite modalities of therapy is dialectical behavioral therapy, which the whole practice is two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
You can love him, and this isn't a healthy relationship for you to be in.
Yeah.
Both can be true. He can be hurting, and he hurts me.
Yeah.
Both can be true. Right. I love my mom, and she's extremely critical and jealous of me. Both can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
We don't have to, like, it's not black and white. And so deciding really, like, that's what a boundary is. It's deciding with both these pieces of information, how can I move in relationship with this person where I'm still protecting myself?
Yeah. Yeah. The both and I think is a really important piece because we can get really judgmental or critical on ourselves for wanting to step away from someone who's hurting,
Mhm.
right? And that doesn't have to mean that you hate them or you want them to suffer. It just means that their behavior is no longer going to affect you.
Mm.
So both and that compassion without the justification of the behavior, I think is perfect.
And I think, right, if we look at narcissistic personality disorder as early childhood trauma,
Yeah.
if you're in a relationship with someone that's sick, you would expect that they would be working and taking care of their physical diagnosis, right? If you're in a relationship with someone that has diabetes, you expect that they're doing what they need to do to treat their diabetes. Somehow we have another expectation for mental health. If someone has early childhood trauma that is manifesting as significant personality disorder, I would expect that you're doing something about it, right? I would expect that you're working on it and taking care of it. That's an expectation for mental health is brain health, right?
Right.
Like we should be taking care of that. And I think you can also set some boundaries up if you're not ready to leave it or you're still deciphering, discern, is this something I walk away from or not? Start to see how willing is your partner to get help, to work on things, to change things. And that gives you a lot more information.
Yeah. You can't change their experience for them, right? You can work with your side of the street and how you're showing up or responding, but you can't change both sides of the relationship. And in order for a relationship to work, both people have to participate, or else we get into a very weird dysfunctional dynamic of one person caring for the other person and resentment building and all the things.
Right.
Um, so yes, yeah, and it same goes, I spent almost a decade in the addiction world, and same goes with addiction, where it's almost like, well, he's just drinking too much or she's just drinking too much, but isn't doing anything about it, but I'm gonna stay because they really need me. It's
Mhm.
like, when that starts to affect your quality of life and your sense of self, it's always their responsibility to
Right.
decide to change.
Right.
So addiction, mental health, physical health, like that's theirs. That's theirs.
Right. It is theirs. Right. And like we can care from a distance and love from a distance.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else you would leave the listeners with if they're in this place of co-parenting, having children who are experiencing some sort of narcissistic behavior from their parent?
I would remind them that, you know, having one parent that is emotionally regulated, emotionally mature, practicing the coping skills, modeling those coping skills, loving them unconditionally, like that's still such a huge resource for kids.
Yeah.
And as much as you can remove your own PTSD and triggering from the relationship with your child, try to do that and really, save that for your own healing and your own time and work and helping your child just decipher healthy versus unhealthy behavior. I don't really like to use the word toxic, right? But just healthy versus unhealthy, wanted versus unwanted,
Yep.
so that they start to navigate future relationships, right? Because there are tons of people that have similar, like we talked about at the very beginning, similar actions or behaviors to people that maybe have narcissistic personality. They don't fit all the diagnostic criteria, but they're still unhealthy, right? At a base level.
Yeah.
So that's the best thing you can do for your kids and support them and love them. And eventually they will realize for themselves. And at the end of the day, when they are adults, they get to choose the relationship they have with that parent. You are not responsible for it. Right now, you're responsible for their mental health, their emotional health, their physical health, but one day you will not be.
Yeah.
And that parent makes their own bed and
Yeah.
they will lie in it. That's what I like to say.
Yeah.
A narcissist is going to keep being a narcissist.
Yeah. 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 Yes. There's so much hope. So much hope for you as the ex-partner to heal from what happened and for your children to come out as well-adjusted, secure
Mm,
children.
absolutely.
Ugh, so good. Well, I'd love to end these, as you know, with the card pull. Are you open to being the conduit for that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so go ahead and close your eyes for me. Just take a couple deep breaths and just pulling a card on behalf of anybody who's listening, just any message that needs to be received. Whenever you feel like the shuffle's complete, oh my gosh, one just like literally flew out.
That mean
It
we
chose
picked that.
for us.
Yeah.
Sharking. If you guys aren't watching the video, it's a picture of two sharks sort of circling each other. This actually is a very perfect message. Let's see what it says. One of the most ancient and revered creatures is sending you a message to move. Sharking says keep gliding in and around relationships or conflict. This is not avoiding, but simply a way of moving into and out of experience. It's not the time to be stagnant. Stillness is not your friend right now. You need to move softly around the situation. Check it out from all angles. With a slow and measured movement, you will outlast the discomfort, drama, or conflict that surrounds you. No big motions are required now. An easy and continuous pace is best suited for you. Movement in the subtle body is helpful to find your rhythm. Don't get pinned down by any one person or expectation. Swim, slide, glide effortlessly, and you will find what you need.
Love that.
Love that. Yeah. Yes, that like slow and steady, sustainable way of observing the relationship, being intermixed in the relationship, helping your children. I think that's,
Right. Just moving through it.
yeah. Yeah. Margot, where can people find you if they want to learn more about how you can support them or their kids?
Yes. So you can follow me on Instagram. It's Margot_LPC. Or you can check out my website. It's hollandhearttherapy.com. But connecting with me either way. I'm on social media a lot, and my website is usually pretty updated with what's going on.
Perfect. Yeah, we're going to link to all of those things in the show notes. So until next time, Margot, thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I so hope you have enjoyed this episode and really taken your notes and gained your insights around how to manage your sanity throughout this co-parenting with a narcissist experience. I know it is so much and so overwhelming and can feel like you just want to give up at times. So please revisit this episode as often as you need to remind yourself of how in control you can be of your experience, even when it feels totally out of control. So just to recap what we talked about today, we covered the 4 core red flags that you can look for in narcissistic people. We covered the specific behaviors that can appear in children who are experiencing a narcissistic parent and how you can help your child navigate that experience. And then we covered what you can do if you are in the midst of post-separation abuse, so that you don't lose your mind, so that you can maintain that really safe, healthy container for your children to come back to after they have been with the narcissistic co-parent. I want you to know that you are so strong to move through this experience. You didn't ask for it, you don't deserve it. And you being able to show up for yourself and your kids is so admirable. So please, please, please keep going. If you need more support, if you need more resources around healing from narcissistic abuse, healing from being with a narcissist, healing your heart, all of the above, please join my email list. I would love to have you in my community where I share information and tips and tricks and videos to help your nervous system. It's a really special place for you to come and just be held in your experience. So until next time, I will see you on the next episode.